So here we're going to introduce you to the skirt block, which is one of the first blocks you'll be using. You'll be meeting in class. We have the front and the back of the skirt block here. These are the full scale ones. So full scale means these are the sizes that you would use to make actual garments and to sample in, either from home or at university. The labelling, we have the name. So I've got Melanie and UTS. Then I have the skirt block, which is the name of the garment. I have the front, which is the front, the size 10. And here we have no SA/HA. No SA and HA means no seam allowance and hem allowance. So the main difference between the block and the pattern is that the block is a really basic shape that we can use to begin creating designs from, to alter, to make your final designs. When you're making those designs, then you start adding hem allowance and seam allowance. So for our blocks, we have no seam allowance and hem allowance. That's just a little reminder to you guys not to cut these out as they are, that you need to turn them into actual patterns with seam allowance before you can use them. So over here on the front, we have a straight line down this side. This is the center front, so I've labeled it CF, and I've written on fold. So if you want to create a full pattern piece that does the whole front of the skirt, you'll need to trace your block this side, flip it, and then trace the other side. On here, this is the hip, and we have SS for side seam. So that side seam runs down here, and this hip line has a little notch on the side seam, and that helps us match it with the side on the back of the skirt. This is our waist, and this is our hem down the bottom. It's really helpful when you're starting out to label all of these things on your blocks as you're getting to know it, so you will not make as many mistakes. So I've written hem down the bottom here. On the waist, I have a dart to create more shaping around the waist. So when this dart is closed, you can see that it's starting to create shaping up to the waist and around the hip area. So at the top of the dart, we have 2 notches to indicate the stitching, where the stitching finishes, and we have a drill hole, and I've labeled it end of dart. We have the same on the front on the back over here. We have the dart legs, the notches, and then the drill hole at the end of the dart. When you transfer your block to a pattern, an important alteration to make, apart from adding seam allowance, is also moving these drill holes from the end of the dart up 15 millimeters. So that is another indicator that this is a block and not a pattern. The drill hole is seated on the end of the dart. So on both patterns, the back and the front, I have a grain line running all the way down. So sometimes on your patterns or your blocks where you have a center front straight line, you don't need that grain line necessarily because you know that this is the grain line, but I've drawn it on here anyway. On the back, I know this is the back of the skirt without reading the labelling because there is double notches here at the back. This is the centre back. The centre back is labelled CB, so this seam runs down the back of the skirt, and this down over here is our side seam labelled SS, and this notch here will match with this notch here when they're sewn together. We have another back waist dart to create that fitting around the garment. We have our hip line drawn on, and I've labelled my hem down the bottom. Now, as I said, these are full scale. Here we have our third scale patterns. So our third scale or miniature means that we can do practices of different pattern making techniques in our journals in a way that is not using as much paper, it doesn't take as much time, but we're learning exactly the same skills. So here, this is my center front with a straight line. I've got all of the same information on my third scale as I do on the full scale. So I have a center front, the dart notches, the side seam, the hip notch, the hem, and the information on the labeling. On the back, again, all of the same information is present. And that's it.